Welcome to Bungalows for Bachelors. The house is done on the inside. Let's finish it on the outside, and boom, just like that, we're going to be done. All right. So, what is landscaping? Well, it's scaping the land around your house, right? So, you're going to be designing, hopefully, having some kind of plan for where you'd want paths, bushes, flowers, trees, whatever. And you're going to form your land to that plan, surrounding your home so that you can boost the curb appeal of your house and have as many functional spaces as possible, right? So it's going to be the final touches that make your home and your property as high value and as beautiful as you can make it, right? Because you've done all this work on the inside of your house, but most people aren't going to see that from the outside. So your landscaping is a huge opportunity for you to show how much you care about your project, because you wouldn't have gotten this far if you didn't care about this project. I think you care. I care. Parts of landscaping. So drainage, I'm going to go into detail on these things, but we're going to talk about a few things. Drainage, driveways, walking access and paths, the gardens, and social spaces. So let's kind of jump right into it. These are the general parts of landscaping, and it can be more complicated than this, but this should touch most of the things here. So drainage. The first thing we want to think about with a landscape plan is when the water falls out of the sky, where is it going to go? Because we can have a really bad day if we don't think about this. We can either send water towards our foundation, or we can accidentally have a big runoff problem where we're having a bunch of erosion and it's killing a bunch of grass and water's ponding, and it can be a mess, right? So drainage. Okay. The first thing to think about is gutters and roof runoff. So when it rains on your roof, hopefully you've got some way of controlling where that water is going to go next, because if it falls to the ground, it's going to splash on the ground. It's going to cause erosion problems on the ground. It's going to cause a drip line. It's going to splash dirt up onto your siding. It's going to make a big mess, and it's not good for anything. It's not good for anybody. So we don't like it. All right. So get some gutters on your house. I know they don't look as cool as having your normal fascia board and everything, but get some gutters on there so you can manage that water, protect your house. Get them in some downspouts if possible. Get them inside some underground drains, tubes, right? A drainage wastewater system you've set up. You're not going to put it into your sewer system, but it can go into the stormwater system. So sometimes that's piped out to a curb and dumped in the street. Sometimes it's taken into a stormwater drain. It kind of depends, but you want to get that stuff away from your house. And, if you don't have the budget for burying all those lines in the ground, well, then at least get it down to the ground and get at least 5 feet away from your foundation before you discharge it, because that's just the best thing for your foundation. So got to keep in mind that roof water. Now, very likely, if you've gotten this far and you're in this far of a project, you have already dealt with any kind of city. If you're in a city, if you're in a county, doesn't matter as much, but you have dealt with impervious cover increases due to permitting and stormwater. The SWMP stands for Stormwater Management Plan. Okay, on small projects, it's less of a big deal. But if you're building a full house on a full piece of property or more than that, you're gonna have an increase in runoff off your property. And the whole impervious covered thing is when if I have a property with a bunch of grass and it rains, the ground is going to absorb a bunch of water, and that's not going to run off onto other things. If I cover that property in concrete, the ground can't absorb water anymore. So now I've got to deal with all this extra water, and it's going to flow somewhere. It's going to flow into the street, and which is going to go into the storm drains, which is going to have to be handled by this infrastructure. So we got to keep that stuff in mind. So that's why we account for this whole drainage thing, is we got to know how much water do we got that we're dealing with, and where's it going to go. So in general, general strategy with drainage, first of all, is to slope everything away from the house. You don't want water going towards your house. So do whatever it takes to get that. Now, sometimes the ground is definitely sloping towards your house, and if you can't install a retaining wall or something to hold that dirt back and fix the grade and get the grade to go away from your house, then you basically going to need to do something like a French drain, which is basically a buried drain system that's designed to catch water that runs on top of the ground and flows underground, because water does flow underground. It'll catch all that water moving towards the foundation. It'll fall down some drain rock into a perk pipe, and it will flow out that pipe to somewhere else, and it won't go towards your house. So that's a French drain. Now sometimes you gotta, depending on where you're at in the rules, you may need to take some steps to have the increase in impervious cover on your lot the increase in runoff from that needs to be mitigated by some technique, whether it's a dry well or it's a detention pond or something. It's usually not going to be a retention pond, because retention ponds are for holding water permanently for long periods of time. We don't really want, unless you have a pond on your property and you want to have a pond, then don't worry about retention. So the whole premise of a detention pond is storms come most of the time in waves, right? So it's going to start raining, it's going to rain harder, it's going to rain hard for a little bit, and then it's going to rain a little bit less, and then it's going to stop raining. That's right. That's the flow of storms. So what you need to do is basically slow the water down, right? So the whole point is this storm is going to dump some X amount of water on your property, and if you have covered all your grass and ground with impervious cover, water's not going to get absorbed into your property, therefore it's going to get dumped in the street. Now the street has to handle it, and the city's infrastructure has to handle it. If everybody does that, and the city's infrastructure can't handle it, then everything floods, and then you have problems. And nobody wants that, right? So we need to make sure that things are good, things can handle it. So what's important is not that you are able to prevent that amount of water. The goal is not to prevent water from running off your property. The goal is to prevent an increase in the runoff due to the extra impervious cover. So the way you do that is by timed releases, right? So basically what's going to happen is a dry well is an example of you're actually so you basically dig a big hole in the ground and you fill it with drain rock and of course filter fabric, so it stays that way. And then it acts like a big area for water to build up. So when the storm comes, the rain starts flowing, water starts accumulating, that water is going to accumulate and be dumped into this hole in the ground. It's not going to flow off your property. It will build up and build up and build up in the thing. And theoretically, all things being equal, it's sized so that for most storms, it's going to build up and then the storm's going to be over and it's going to just soak up in the ground and it's never going to be a problem. Now, detention ponds are a little bit different in that they still dump the water out onto, and you're pretty much never going to deal with the detention pond for a regular house build, but if you have a crazy system, you might have to. But the detention pond principle is that you are going to let water build up in a detention pond, which can be grass. It doesn't have to be like concrete walls and stuff like that. It can still be a grass area. And it's going to basically build up there while the storm is mounting. And then there's going to be a thing called a weir, or basically an escape, a place for water to flow out of this pond at a small rate. That would have been the same rate that the property was releasing runoff before you developed it. So basically the water builds up in this pond and it flows out of this small little gate. And it builds up and builds up and builds up, and the flow stays pretty consistent. And then theoretically you size this pond by the area and by the geological, the local data to know the storm quantities and things, so that you never have a storm that fills up the pond and the pond overflows and dumps all of its water. All right, so that's how you size ponds and stuff. But that's the basic premise. Be aware of the drainage. The rainwater is a big deal, and it can be treated like a big deal in most cases. So neighbors aren't going to want you flooding their properties with all this new water. So you gotta be careful. Now, all that serious talk aside, let's talk artsy fartsy now. Okay, so driveways, right? So you can have a driveway as part of your landscaping, and usually they're going to be gravel, asphalt, or concrete. The gravel is basically going to be more like a loose base. You have a compacted base layer in the ground. It's a good solid engineered soil structure thing, and you're going to put a nice looking gravel on top of that. And that needs to be maintained a little more often than asphalt, and certainly more than concrete, but it is usually cheaper than doing asphalt or concrete. And it has a certain look to it. So the cool thing about that is you can kind of pick the gravel type that you want to see, and that can be part of the landscape. Now, asphalt is usually going to look pretty darn gray or black because it's just asphalt mixed with rock. And, you're going to have the same thing. You're going to have a compacted base layer of good structural dirt, and then you're going to put the asphalt down, and you're going to lay that down on top of that, smooth it all out, make it happy. And concrete, of course, is going to be the same type of approach. You're going to have some layer of compacted base, and you're going to put, usually 4 inches is good for a driveway with rebar, with steel in it. And typically, because concrete is a stronger structure, it's going to require less base material below it than an asphalt driveway would, because that concrete is going to distribute the load of whatever's on it over a wider area, so it's a little more stable. So in terms of longevity, concrete's going to last the longest because it's the strongest. It's it's built to last. So it's the strongest in terms of the weight it can carry, and it's how long it's going to stay that way. And assuming you've prepared everything properly, it won't have a lot of cracking, shifting, moving problems. Now, of course, what are the purpose of driveways? Well, you're trying to get access to the front door or the garage, or you got a loop going on or something, right? But driveways, they're a part of your landscaping. Got to think about those things. Now, walking access and paths, right? So these can be concrete flat work. These can be all kinds of other concrete shapes. They can be natural stone. They can be asphalt too, I suppose. But the basic premise is you're going to want to move around your yard and your land in a certain way, depending on what kind of land you're dealing with. And these are just different ways to do it. But keep in mind, you can have walking paths. You want to know how to get around. Gardens, of course. Gardens are a big part of landscaping. Adding natural vegetation is very appealing. It makes the house look more pleasant in a more natural environment. It kind of depends, of course, where you're building. If you're going for a more industrial look, then you're probably going to have less of this. But, you want to keep in mind the boundaries of the gardens. Do I want to do some kind of small retaining with some brick or stone? Do I want to have the mulch? Do I want to do flowers, trees, or shrubs? What kind? And, of course, irrigation. Now that I've got all this stuff living here, if I got to stay alive, I should probably put some irrigation in. So these are all things to think about with your gardens. And, of course, your social spaces. These are pivotal to being built into the landscaping plan, just because it's all part of the layout of where you're going to be. Are you going to be under the shade of a tree? Are you going to be out in the sun? Which way are things going to face? How do we get access to it? The walking paths thing, So these are, very important parts. So pergolas in that bottom photo is an example of like that wooden structure. That is the pergola. But it's designed to kind of enclose this particular space where people can hang out and talk and have a good time. Patios are going to be attached to the house, open spaces that are covered, and it's just a good exterior space to have a good time and still have close access to your house. Pools, of course, are always a good time, assuming no one's falling into them, but, gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. But, pools are pools. If you're going to have one, then you certainly better be prepared for a complicated landscaping plan, because above ground or in ground, these are complicated and expensive, and your landscaping is going to be way more. You're going to need a much better plan if you're going to put a pool in, because you got to have paths around the pool, maybe walls around the pool, just like it's showing in that photo there. So, got to think about that. And fire pits, of course, can be an essential part of having a nice landscaping plan, especially if you're in a colder climate where you can have fireplaces or fire pits and fires more often. When you're in a hotter climate, it's less fun, but, stuff to keep in mind. So that's it. That's kind of the summary of things to think about with landscaping. If you want to see how the Essential Craftsman handled his landscaping and all of the stuff regarding the outside of his house, then watch episodes 84, 91 to 94, 108, 111, 124, 127, and 128 by the Essential Craftsman. And of course, give this old house a watch. It's a good channel. It's got a lot of do-it-yourselfer stuff, and they talk about the video is how to landscape a small urban yard, this old house, and that's a good one for knowing that. So that said, congratulations, guys, because you have made it through the home building program, and hopefully you have gained some kind of grasp on generally how homes are built and what you now know you don't know and what you need to learn more about. So, this has been a pretty decent summary. If you have questions, you can always, show up on those BFB success team calls every week. And I'm here to answer those questions and help you all on your journey. So I'm excited that you made it this far. And, it's always cool to build stuff and to know about building stuff. So I'll see you around.